This past summer, we took a trip to Chicago, Illinois to the trial gardens at Ball Horticulture. Hi, I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings, and if you've watched our videos at all from this past year, you notice I talked a lot about our new Bloomables introduction of perennials and just how excited that we were with the garden we planted and how these plants performed. Well, we're excited to bring you new Bloomables perennials for 2025. So as I mentioned, we went out to Ball this summer and walked through the trial gardens, and it was so beautiful to be able to see these perennials all planted up in a garden setting and to see them all side by side. We were there, it was the end of July, which is really one of the hottest, driest months of the year for us in Michigan, and I'm sure it's probably a lot similar for them in Illinois too. So we were kind of wondering, what are the plants going to look like? But it was also a good time to go because it was a true test to see how were these plants holding up in the heat of the summer. So I had done some trials in 2024 on some sample plants that were sent to us, and I was blown away by how they performed in our trial gardens at Garden Crossings. So to go to Ball and to see how they were doing there as well, and their plants had been in the garden, some of them for 2-3 years. So I was able to see just, even after a couple years, how they were performing, which is always nice. I mean, you can plant a plant and it does great maybe one year, but then the following year, maybe it doesn't do as good. So to see them in the garden for a couple years was nice to see that, okay, these plants, they held on and they continue to look good year after year. So we're going to feature 7 new perennials, and I'm going to say 7 is actually going to be more because I'm going to talk about a specific genera of plants, and there might be a few different colors that are within that genera. So we'll probably get more up to maybe 20 plants that we're going to feature in today's video. So the first one we're going to start with, and this one was actually one that in our trial gardens that we were really impressed with. And it's a digitalis, or foxglove. So the Arctic fox lemon yellow digitalis was outstanding. It is a true perennial. So which that means is it's a plant that comes back year after year. Most digitalis are biennials. So they'll flower, drop their seed, and that's where the flowers come from the following year. Sometimes they're short-lived because if those flowers, the seeds don't germinate, then the plant essentially is done. But this lemon cream is hardy in zones 5 to 9, so it's very cold tolerant, which is nice. Full sun, they like to be planted in full sun locations. And the thing I like about digitalis is that they're a hummingbird plant. So really any flower that has that nice tubular flower on it is going to be something that the hummingbirds are going to love to visit. They get about 24 inches tall or so. And in our trials this year, the first bloom was, it was huge. It was at least this big around and probably a good 12 or more inches tall. So the first bloom was just giant. And then once that flower had faded, we trimmed it back, and then it sent off a bunch more blooms throughout the summer. And that's one thing to keep that blooming. Just give it a light trim to any of those spent blooms, and it's going to continue to put on more flowers throughout the summer. In fact, we still had that blooming in our gardens in the fall, September, October. We were still seeing beautiful flowers that late in the season here in West Michigan. The next variety that I talked a lot about last year was the summer-long series of Agastache. So we have other Agastache hyssop in our garden and other different brands, and they are great Agastache. But this particular one, it was very compact in its habit, only about 22 inches tall. And that plant, once they started blooming, they went all summer long. So anytime I was out walking in the garden, there was always flowers on that Agastache. Now, I must say the summer-long series are hardy in zones 7 to 10, so watch your hardiness zone. Typically, where we're at here in West Michigan, we're a zone 5B, 6A. So we'll see if they come back for us next year. We're going to talk about that if they do. But watch your hardiness zone if you are interested in these summer-long series, because they are what I'm going to call a tender perennial, especially for those in our area. It created a nice upright mounding shape. So perfect for, I would say you could put it like front of the garden or mid garden, depending on how tall the plants are that you have in your garden. Excellent for pollinators, very fragrant. So hyssop is a very fragrant plant. You touch it and it smells kind of like anise. Deer resistant. So if you're looking for deer resistant, this is a great deer resistant plant. Likes to be grown in full sun, and the colors that the summer long series come in are peach, magenta, yellow, coral, and lilac. So really a great spectrum of color. So if one color is not your thing, there's a lot of color options in that summer long series. So we're excited to have them. I know last year when we were walking through the trials, people are like, oh, can I buy them? And I'm like, not yet, next year. Right now we're just trialing them to see how they do. And so now is your opportunity. If you were that person that said, oh, where can I buy them? When can I buy them? The time is now. And Garden Crossings is a mail order company. So we ship plants all over the United States. So if you are looking for or interested in any of the plants we're talking about today, we're going to put links in the description below so you can get more information. But also, too, if you're interested in purchasing them, we'll make it really easy for you. If you're local to Zeeland, Michigan, you can stop into our retail garden center anytime from April through usually the end of September or so, and check out all the great plants that we have to offer. So coneflowers are also a fan favorite, I think, and I think it's because coneflowers are they're easy to grow. Some of you know them as coneflowers. Acacia would be another name. And particularly, we've carried the Sombrero series for several years and have been really, really happy with the performance of the Sombrero series, especially for us here in West Michigan in our Zone 6A garden. They always come back regularly, faithfully, and do a really good job for us here. So they're very cold tolerant and overwinter very well. So the new series we're adding is the Poco series. So this is a much smaller habit than some of the other varieties that we currently carry. So it's the Sombrero Pocos. And what's nice about this is the Sombrero series in general, including the Pocos, is they have excellent branching. So the more branching your perennials have, the more flowers you're going to get. So anytime, you get a plant and it's just one stalk with a beautiful flower, although that flower is beautiful, it's one and done. So the more branching that plant has, the more flowers you're going to get and the more enjoyment you're going to get out of that plant. Coneflowers are also a very long blooming perennial. If you have any spent blooms, you can trim them, or especially later on in the season, I would leave those spent blooms on because the birds really enjoy the seeds out of the cones of the coneflower. The Poco series, this year we're adding 2 of the 4 colors. We're adding the hot coral and the yellow. The other nice thing with the sombreros is the colors stay really rich and true and are non-fading. So, if you've got this vibrant pink and you're loving it, you want it to stay vibrant pink, right? You don't want it to fade off to something. And that's true of the Pocos, is they're going to keep their nice, vibrant coloration. The butterflies love coneflowers. The deer tend to stay away, so 2 great attributes. Hardy in zones 4 to 9. They do like to be grown in a full sun location, and they are about 16 or so inches tall. So as I mentioned, a compact coneflower variety. So if you're looking to kind of tier your garden with coneflowers, and that's something I like to do, I like to take all the coneflowers and just plant them in an area in my garden. And the reason I like to do that is because I love all the various coloration that's going on from the coneflowers. So if you stagger your taller ones in the back, your medium-sized ones in the middle, and these Pocos in the front, you could have a nice layered up look in your garden from small, medium to tall coneflowers. So excited to get some of these Pocos in my garden. We had not trialed these at all. We do have a lot of sombreros out in our garden, but the particular Poco series, we did not have the option or opportunity to trial. So seeing them out in the trial gardens and seeing just how much smaller they were compared to other sombreros that were planted in that same bed, it was nice to see just that unique shortness of the plant. The next plant is just kind of a whimsy, airy perennial, something I would use front of the border. A lot of times you'll find them in rock gardens or in areas that maybe have really well-drained soil. And the plant I'm talking about is an Armaria, and the series is Dream Area. So the Dream Area series was bred and it blooms from frost to frost. That's kind of how they're describing it. It's a frost to frost bloomer. So early summer to late fall. They have beautiful, whimsy, ball-shaped blooms. The blooms are maybe about an inch or so across, and they just continue to flower all summer long. You're going to get your most prolific blooms in the early season and again in the late season. So as I mentioned, they're a cold-tolerant perennial, so they do like to kind of find their best time to shine in the cooler parts of the season. But throughout the summer, you will see them continue to put on more flowers. And not only do they have their beautiful, like grassy looking mound of foliage, they're going to have some flowers throughout the middle of the summer as well. But that's one of those plants where it's long blooming. But if you're looking to kind of heavy load your garden with early color, this is going to be where you're going to get it. Or late color, the same plant is going to offer you that as well. Armaria are hardy in zones 5 to 9, so they've got a pretty good cold to warm spectrum. They only get about 12 inches tall, so the mound of foliage itself is probably only about 4 inches, and then you've got another, 6, 8 inches for the stem and the flower to kind of just, blow in the breeze in your garden. There's 3 new colors this year, and they kind of have fun names. There's Hypnotic Dreams, which is a beautiful red with a little bit of magenta undertones. There's Dream Clouds, which is a beautiful white. And then Dream Weaver, which is a really nice purple. There's a total of 6 colors in this series. So this is a plant that would be kind of fun if you kind of staggered, all 6 of them in a row and maybe did a repeat if your garden was big enough to kind of get you some variation of color along the front border. Something fun to think about. That might be the perfect thing for your garden. The next plant on the list, and oh my goodness. So there's some plants that are just retina burning. They are just so vibrant, so bright, and just so like, whoa. And that is definitely the next plant we're talking about, which is a Delosperma, and it's part of the Ocean Sunset series. So there are 4 colors in the Ocean Sunset series. And when my daughter and I were walking through the garden, she's like, Mom, that is such a cool color. I'm like, oh, yes, it is. And we were just talking last week about, flowers and what's on our camera roll and all that kind of thing. And she says, I have to say, I probably have the most of the Delosperma when we were at Ball this summer because that plant was so cool. And this is taken from a 20-something-year-old. She's saying this is a cool plant. So I definitely value opinions from, the younger generation too, because I think that they have maybe a little bit different take on what they're enjoying in the garden. So it was neat to see that that was something that really also intrigued her. So the four colors are Orange Glare, Orange Vibe, Violet, and Violet Flare. You really can't go wrong with any color, but my personal favorite are the oranges. And I'm not an orange person, but the oranges just really were so beautiful and so bright and so gotta have it. If you have a place for a very low growing perennial that's well drained, this is definitely a must-have plant to add to your garden and in your collection. Zones 5 to 9, so definitely again fairly cold tolerant for most of us. And definitely on the warm spectrum as well for our friends, in the warmer climates. This is a great plant for you as well. Not only is it long blooming, throughout the summer, it also has a very high flower count. So you're going to get this nice low growing mound. It's only, maybe 4 inches tall or so, but you're going to have this mound of just solid flower color. It's really impressive. So if you want to, I would recommend try one. Pick your favorite color. Just try one to start. And then I think you might find yourself wanting to add more throughout your garden. Just to have kind of those fillers in those spots in your garden that maybe you don't know what to put there. You just need a little something. Well, this is little, it's short, and it's definitely something that you're going to want to have in your garden. The next variety is actually a Gardia. And Gardia are a nice drought-tolerant, long-blooming perennial as well. This series is the Spin Top series. So before going to the trial gardens, I was not familiar with, I was familiar with Gardia, obviously, but not the Spin Top series. And I don't know that we were even necessarily looking to add another Gardia to the collection. But when we saw these, we're like, you know what? Yeah, let's add it. This is a great plant. So there's two different colors. There's red and there is red starburst. So red is obviously red. And then red starburst has some red and yellow on the flower. So it's more of a bicolor. A little bit more interest, I think, because it just, I don't know, by having the two colors, it kind of breaks the flower up a little bit and just, it makes it pop more. Just, that's a my opinion thing. But what we liked about the Starburst series is that it had excellent branching. Sometimes Gardia can be kind of, I don't want to say stringy, but they kind of split open. I guess that's a good way of saying it. Where these had a really good habit to them, nice, dense habit. They weren't splitting open, and lots of branching, which in turn, like we keep saying, lots of branching means lots of buds and lots of flowers. The flowers are kind of daisy looking, kind of a sawtooth, I guess, kind of edge on them. So kind of a sharp looking petal, although they're not sharp at all. It's just a pointy petal. Very drought tolerant. They only get about 14 inches tall, so they're not a super huge size Gardia. Another just small space garden option. Also works well in container gardens if that's more your style. So don't be afraid to try really any of these perennials we talked about today, not only in the landscape, but in containers as well. Also, Gardia are a native variety, so if you're looking to add to your native garden, this is a variety that will definitely check that native box. And two, deer and rabbit resistant is very important to many of us that have those pesky critters in our garden. So instead of fighting them, it's best to try to find the plants that are deer and rabbit resistant. Now, I always feel like I have to follow that up with, deer and rabbit resistant does not mean deer and rabbit proof. If a deer or a rabbit is hungry enough, they're gonna eat what they can find. But it's definitely not going to be their first choice of plants to go munching on if they are hungry. And the last plant that we're going to talk about today is a Saxifraga. And we carried these a long time ago. It's been many years since we've carried them. And when we saw these in the trials, we thought, let's bring it back again. It's just, it checks that early spring blooming box. And there's a lot of great plants, but how can we bring plants to the garden that will bring color quicker? And Saxifraga is definitely a plant that is a early season bloomer and blooms for a fairly long amount of time. So usually, depending on where you live, they'll start blooming somewhere around March or April and can bloom through June. So long blooming on the early part of the season and nice because they're nice ground cover, so they don't take up a lot of space in the garden, and it's just another one you can kind of tuck here or there and enjoy the splashes of color. So they're hardy in zones 4 to 9. So again, very cold tolerant as well as heat tolerant. They only get about 6 inches tall. So I did mention they're a very low growing perennial. So 6 inches tall by about 7 inches wide. So they're not gonna, they're gonna create just about a yay big little mound of color. It's not something that's going to spread like your low growing creeping phlox. It's just a little bop of color for your garden to bring it that early season color. The varieties we're carrying is Mardo Red Picotee, which is really pretty. It's white and then it's got these magenta pink tips. So really very interesting looking. There's also Mardo Hot Rose, which obviously is a nice, beautiful rose color, and Mardo Red, which is a red with some pink undertones. I hope you enjoyed these new varieties from 2025 that are long blooming, and I hope you enjoyed kind of just seeing some of the, we're going to call it behind the scenes because I was there, you weren't, of these gardens that we walked through to see all these beautiful varieties. It's not easy picking new plant varieties. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, a lot of consideration, and basically we want you to know that we don't take it lightly when we add a new plant to our collection. We want to make sure it's an excellent plant that we feel comfortable will do well in just about anyone's garden. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. Be sure to check out the links also below to get more information. And I'm going to put a link to our whole Bloomables collection if you want to see everything that is in that collection. There's a lot of great plant varieties there. Thanks for watching. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings.